Mark's latest phase and the earlier one. So what I want to do now is actually start off with what I feel is a turning point, a kind of pivotal film in Mark's development, if I can say so, which is a film called The Pitch, which was made in 1998. And for me, this has two aspects that I'd like to ask Mark to talk about. First of all, it's in some ways a tribute to a lost aspect or an overlooked aspect of Hollywood cinema. On the other hand, it's a tribute to films that are made with a complete integrity of time and space, that is, in a single shot. And around 1995, the centenary of cinema, I know Mark became interested in the films of the Lumiere brothers and the way in which they worked with time and space. So perhaps we could just start off by showing The Pitch, and then talk a little bit about your double interest, one in popular cinema, Hollywood cinema, which we'll come back to later on, but also with the extraordinarily important influence of the Lumieres. And I do remember Mark commenting around the time of 1995, wistfully watching the Lumieres film A Boat Leaving a Harbour and saying, well, it was downhill all the way from then on. But anyway, if we could start with The Pitch, and this is also an oddity in Mark's work in that it's the only film in which he himself plays a starring role. That's true, isn't it? The only one.
Yes, if you think of him as me.
Okay, think about this. The extra is a thoroughly overlooked phenomenon in film. If we examine the cinema for its inventions, its real inventions, the ones that are created there and nowhere else, well, then the extra is surely one of the most important. Yet as far as I know, there is scarcely a word written about it anywhere. The uniqueness of the extra lies in the fact that it is both there and not there. No other story art is able to create this effect so precisely, so contradictorily. Think of the novel. A scene is described. A central character is standing on a street corner thinking about something important. All around her are people walking, shopping, eating, holding hands. I could write this, and that's about as precise as I can get without giving characterization to these background people. But in film, each one of these extras in the background has a real presence on the screen. Some are fat, some are tall, others look a little bit like people you might know. Only film could have the extra both there and not there. Generic, invisible, standing in for a background reality, yet absolutely individual. Extras fill the space, they make it seem real. They carry on imaginary conversations which are never recorded. Their lips flap, but they make no noise that might interfere with the sync sound recording of the actors. And sometimes, if you look closely, extras can forget that they are not really meant to be there. They might look at the star of the film, or even straight to camera. This happens a lot, and you don't usually notice it unless you become obsessed by extra action. And if you do, then you can see nothing else. I was an extra once. Maybe you saw me in a 1980s film called Head Office. I was a background MBA on graduation day at Harvard, and along with the star of the movie, I had to throw my mortar hat up in the air and mouth an absolutely silent cheer. I got $30 for that. I remember on the set, we were all warned that if we tried to speak to the star of our film, then we would be instantly dismissed. Let's face it, extras are the silent proletariat of the film set. Their job is to be quiet and in the background of history. There are in fact many different types of extras, different genres, and some of them have quite specialized skills. The revolutionary extra, for instance, is always running up and down, backwards and forwards. On the contrary is the queuing extra, who stands in line patiently for take after take after take. And the riding extra, an important presence in westerns, where cowboys on horses ride across the screen to animate the landscape behind the action. And the dancing extra, whether in period dramas or in disco films, able to take the floor with or without an extra partner. And in empire films, there are, of course, ethnic extras who have to be able to die in the millions as they are slaughtered by the English, Americans, or French. The drunken brawling extra creates diversions in the bar or in the street. If a movie must go on a bus, then we have the traveling extra. If there is danger, then it's always useful to have the terrified extra. And then for all those street scenes, you can never have enough ambulatory extras. The ones you walk in front of, alongside of, or even behind the actors at a perfectly regulated pace. The dead extra demands a skill all unto itself. Slightly more marginal is the soft porn extra, who must simulate erotic writhing at the drop of a hat. I love all these extras. I love the way they talk and pretend to talk. I love the way they eat plastic food in the background of restaurant shots and look at things and smile, pointing to companions. I love the way they stoop down to tie their shoelaces, the way they smoke cigars, how they look at them, holding them up for inspection as they exhale, or the way they stop for disasters and gasp in horror, their hands placed protectively over their mouths at other extras pretending to be dead. Everything extras do is compelling. So I want to recognize these people in the background. I want to put them in the spotlight, make them important. I want to make a film only with extras. The film will be called Extra Extra, and in it I will stage a number of big budget-type movie scenes, eliminate all the main parts, all the dialogue scenes between actors, everything to do with plot and characterization, but I'll keep all the extras and choreograph their action as if the actors were still there. I want to shoot this film, of course, in CinemaScope, because when it comes to extras, widescreen means literally more of them. This is the moment when you begin to see extras, to see masses of them, writ large across the screen. So you see how exciting a project like this could be. And I was thinking you might be able to help, so thanks a lot.
So, Mark, as I said earlier, I think this is a kind of important turning point, and perhaps you could just talk a little bit about it as one shot, as a film made in one single shot.
Well, again, it goes back to this earlier point I mentioned about trying to think about knowing that I wanted to work with film, but searching around still for what I wanted to do with film. And my first films, including this one, partially, dealt very much with what, in the language at the time, sort of the horrible language at the time, I should add, deconstructing the cinematic experience and trying to deconstruct the subject that is produced in cinema. And therefore, I found myself making films for the gallery which were very similar to other films by other artists at the same time. This will be the mid-90s, which basically staged certain aspects of the cinema. I talked already about Two Impossible films being about opening credits and closing credits. This one is obviously about the extras. I made other films about endings and things like this. And but it seemed to me after a while, I also want to say that I never thought about any of these things when I was doing something. I tended just to stumble from one thing to another without any kind of coherent strategy. But so any reflection I have on it is ex post facto and sitting here some 10 years later. It seemed to me that the way of working, I guess the crucial moment was actually in Stockholm. I mean, I can place the moment in Stockholm in a conference with Raymond Bellur, and we were on a panel together, and we both suddenly agreed that that cinema was in fact a successful installation, and everything that anybody needed to know about the cinema and its installation form was already known and fully understood. And you could even kind of you could even sort of set it historically and say that the successful installation of film at its high point, at its apex, was from the invention of sound to the invention of television. And therefore, all these kinds of what we were calling part cinema or deconstruction cinema were just really, to my mind, stating over and over again the very obvious knowledge that every cinematic audience already knew. Nobody was fooled by the cinema. Everybody understood that when they were watching a film, they were watching an illusion. So why were we constantly pressing home this ideology, at least? It's a longer story because in the history of the avant-garde, we have a very strong tradition, two strong traditions very connected. One is that the artist brings, in this case, the cinema into the gallery as a ready-made, so the entire experience of the cinema, its projector, its screen, the dark room, sound, everything else are brought in and in effect are put in inverted commas. So you then see these cinemas built inside galleries where artists present a cinematic experience. And the other related form is what in the avant-garde is the tradition of the surrogacy or surrogate forms, where artists, in testing out the definition of art, decide to impersonate other makers of other different forms. So you have artist as writer, conceptual art, let's say, artist as filmmaker in this case. Anyway, so it seemed to me that all of these forms were becoming, all of these kind of gestures were becoming entirely mannerist and repetition. How many times can you see a projector in a space and be reminded that there's a projector in the space? So I thought that I needed to, bearing in mind that I never thought this, I thought that I needed to reflect on what was the origin of my work anyway, which was pictorial form, because I was working with photography and working with a strong tradition of the everyday, picture of every day and so on. And the pitch, sorry Laura, this is a long rambling way to get back to your question, but the pitch was a kind of transitional